Andre Washington was 41 years old when he made the most calculated decision of his life, lying in a hospital bed, pretending he couldn't remember his own name. His wife Camille stood over him, squeezing his hand, calling him baby, her voice soft with practiced concern. She believed the crash had taken his memory. She believed he was diminished, confused, and easy to manage. She had no idea he had heard every word she said to his doctor before she walked through that door. For 31 days, Andre Washington played the role of a broken man, while his wife moved through their shared life like she was already the sole owner of it, making calls, contacting attorneys, and positioning herself to take everything he had spent 2 decades building. She thought she was outmaneuvering a man who couldn't remember her name. What Camille never considered was that the man she was robbing had been watching her do it the entire time. And the moment he decided to remember everything, she would never recover from it. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The bridge was not finished yet, but it already looked like something that would last. Andre Washington stood at the eastern railing at 6 in the morning, a hard hat under his arm, a coffee going cold in his left hand. Below him, the Chattahoochee moved slow and gray in the early light. The crew wouldn't start the pour for another 40 minutes, but Andre had been here since 5:30. He always was. Mr. Washington. Marcus, his site foreman, walked up beside him with a clipboard. Truck 3 is running about 15 minutes behind. Tell them to make it 10, Andre said. Marcus nodded and walked away. No argument, no back and forth. That was how it worked on Andre's sites. Not because he was mean about it, because when Andre said something, it was always worth listening to. The men here had learned that early. He looked back at the bridge, at the rebar cages rising out of the concrete forms, at the scaffolding he had designed with a load tolerance 30% beyond code, because code was the minimum, and Andre did not build to minimums. He had checked the weather last night. He had checked it again at 4 in the morning. He had run the pour schedule 3 times in his head before he left the house. This was the largest contract his firm had ever won. His name was on the sign out front. He had stood in front of that sign the day it went up, and felt something he didn't have a clean word for, something close to what he imagined his father would have felt if his father had ever been given the chance. That was the thought Andre didn't let himself sit in for too long. His father had worked 2 jobs for 30 years, maintenance at a school during the week, security on weekends. A quiet man who did everything right and still got passed over, looked through, handed nothing, never complained, just worked. Andre had watched that with careful, silent eyes from the time he was old enough to understand what he was watching, and he had made himself a single promise. Build something they can't overlook. Build something permanent. He had kept that promise. Slowly, the way real things are built. A civil engineering degree from Georgia Tech. A 2-person firm that became a 12-person firm. Contracts that grew because the work was right and the deadlines were met. A reputation that moved through Atlanta's construction and development world like a quiet current. Reliable, exacting. Andre Washington's name means it gets done. He sipped the cold coffee and watched the first truck pull onto the site. He left the site at 8:40 that night. The rain had started around 6 and hadn't let up. It came down in long, steady sheets across the highway, the kind of rain that blurred taillights into orange smears and made every car look like it was moving through fog. Andre drove with both hands on the wheel. He kept the radio on. After a day like this one, the silence felt necessary. He thought about the house as he drove. The big Craftsman on Ellsworth Avenue, the one with the porch Camille had picked out before they even looked at the floor plan. 8 years ago, they had stood in the driveway with the realtor, and Camille had said, "That porch is where I'll have my morning coffee for the rest of my life." And Andre had smiled, and meant it when he smiled. 8 years. He turned the thought over the way he turned most things over. Quietly. Carefully. No children. That one still sat somewhere low in his chest, if he let himself feel it. He had wanted kids. He'd said so clearly. More than once. Camille always had a reason to wait. Her business, the timing, the house needing work first, a trip they hadn't taken yet. He had stopped bringing it up about 2 years ago, not because he had stopped wanting, because he had learned that some conversations went in circles, and he was not a man who liked circles. And then there were the other things, small things, the kind of things that don't announce themselves. In February, Camille had asked about refinancing the house, which was fine. Interest rates were what they were. But the questions she asked were not questions about rates. They were questions about what the house appraised at, and what equity they were sitting on. He had answered and moved on, and filed it somewhere in the back of his mind. In April, when he updated the life insurance policy, she had sat across the kitchen table and looked at the documents more carefully than he expected. She asked about the payout structure. She asked about beneficiary changes. He had put the papers in the folder and told her he'd handle it, and she had nodded, and neither of them mentioned it again. Victor's calls. That was the newest one. Camille's older brother had never been Andre's favorite person. Too loud, too certain of himself for a man who hadn't built much. But lately, he was calling twice a week, maybe more. Andre could hear Camille's voice lower when she took those calls, the way it lowered when she didn't want sound traveling down the hallway. He noticed all of it. He always noticed. He just hadn't decided yet what he was going to do with it. The traffic light up ahead was green. He was still thinking about Victor's calls when the truck came through the red. The headlights were enormous and instant, and there was no time. Not for braking, not for turning, not for a single word. Just the glass and the impact, and then nothing at all. He came back in pieces. Light first. A white ceiling, blurred at the edges, swimming above him like something seen from underwater. Then sound. The slow beep of a machine, the squeak of rubber soles on a hard floor somewhere down a hallway. Then pain. Deep and total. The kind that doesn't live in one place but everywhere at once, like his whole body had been wrung out and put back wrong. He didn't move. He wasn't sure he could. Time passed in chunks he couldn't measure. Sometimes there were hands, gentle, efficient, checking things he couldn't see. Sometimes the light changed, and he understood that was day, becoming night, becoming day again. He drifted. He came back. He drifted again. He heard Camille before he saw her. Her voice came from the hallway, just outside the room. It floated through the half-open door, with the kind of carry that people don't notice when they think someone can't hear them. "I understand that," she was saying. "I'm just asking what the process looks like. From a legal standpoint." A second voice, calm, measured, a woman's voice. The doctor. "Mrs. Washington, your husband is still in the acute phase. It's really too early to—" "I know that." Camille's tone did not change. It stayed smooth, even, almost patient. That was what made it wrong. A woman who had almost lost her husband would have a shake somewhere in her voice, even a small one. "I'm not trying to rush anything. I just want to understand what we're looking at if the memory doesn't come back. What's the legal threshold for incapacitation? What would that process require?" A pause. The doctor again. "That would involve a formal evaluation, cognitive assessments over time. If there were documented deficits that affected his ability to manage his affairs." "How long," Camille asked, "before something like that could move forward?" Andre lay completely still in the hospital bed. He did not open his eyes. He breathed at the same slow rate he had been breathing. He kept his hands exactly where they were on the blanket. He did not move a single muscle that he didn't have to move. But inside, behind the stillness, his mind was already working, the way it always worked, measuring, cataloging, turning the thing over from every angle to see where it held and where it didn't. He heard footsteps. The conversation moved further down the hallway and then disappeared into the low hum of the hospital. He lay in the dark behind his eyes and thought about the voice. He had known Camille for 11 years, married her for 8. He knew the voice she used when she was angry and pretending she wasn't. He knew the voice she used when she wanted something. He knew the voice she used at dinner parties. Warm, a little musical, calibrated for whatever room she was in. The voice in the hallway was none of those. The voice in the hallway was the voice of someone running numbers. The next morning, the doctor came in alone. She was a compact woman in her 50s, with close-cut natural hair and reading glasses that she wore pushed up on her forehead when she wasn't using them. Her name was on the whiteboard across from the bed. Dr. A. Solis, Neurology. She moved through the room with the quiet efficiency of someone who had done this 1,000 times and was not performing care, just delivering it. She ran through the assessment, followed her pen light, answered his questions about what had happened and what was broken and what wasn't. She was honest and specific, and Andre appreciated that. Then she said it. Given the nature of the trauma, Mr. Washington, some degree of memory disruption would not be unexpected. It's medically plausible. We'd need to run further assessments to understand the full picture. But if someone believed I had lost memory, Andre said. Dr. Solis stopped. What would they do? He said. What's the next step? Legally, I mean. She looked at him for a moment. The question was unusual, and they both knew it. There would be cognitive evaluations, observation over time. If someone wanted to establish that you couldn't manage your own affairs, they'd pursue a formal finding of incapacity. Petition the court. It's not quick, but it can move. Andre nodded once. I need one thing from you, he said. His voice was quiet and level. Don't share anything about my cognitive clarity with anyone but me. Not my wife. Not anyone who comes in after her. Dr. Solis was still. Her expression didn't give much away, but he saw her thinking. Mr. Washington, you're not certain yourself, he said. That's the honest answer. And patient confidentiality is patient confidentiality. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she wrote something in her chart, closed it, and said, I'll be back this afternoon. She left without confirming and without refusing. For his purposes, that was the same as yes. Camille arrived an hour later. Andre heard the door and let his eyes open slowly, the way a man opens his eyes when the light still hurts, when the world is still not quite solid. He let his gaze travel across the ceiling before it found her. He blinked twice, let his brow pull in, just slightly, like a man reaching for something he can't quite close his hand around. Baby. Her voice was soft. She crossed to the bed and took his hand in both of hers. Warm, gentle. He looked at her face. He made it take a moment. Camille, he said. Slow, a little rough. Like the name had weight he wasn't sure he could carry. She exhaled. He felt it through her hands. He watched her face, the way it settled after the breath left her. There was something in it that loosened, something that came down and smoothed over. And he knew that expression. He had seen it before. Not on her face. On the face of a man at a bid opening, reading a number that came in under budget. It was not relief. It was the look of someone whose plan had just moved forward. Darnell showed up on day 3. He came through the door the way he always moved. Not loud, not slow, just present. A big man who had learned somewhere along the way that you don't have to announce yourself if you belong. He was wearing a work jacket with the Washington Contracting logo on the chest, and he had sawdust on his boots, and he looked like a man who had come straight from a job site because he had. He stopped just inside the doorway and looked at Andre in the bed, the tubes, the monitors, the bruised and swollen face, and something moved through his expression that he didn't try to hide, something that was grief and anger at the same time. Hey, Darnell said. Hey, Andre said. slow and flat, like a man hearing his own voice from a distance. Darnell pulled the chair close to the bed, sat down. Camille had gone to the vending machine on the floor below. She'd mentioned it as she left, giving them the room with a smile that was perfectly pitched between loving wife and gracious hostess. Andre had clocked the moment she cleared the doorway. He turned his head and looked at his brother directly, and dropped everything. "Listen to me," Andre said. His voice was low and completely clear. Nothing slow about it, nothing rough, just him. "Before I was off the ventilator, she was in that hallway asking the doctor about incapacitation. Legal process, timeline, how long it takes." Darnell went very still. "She didn't know I could hear her," Andre said. "Nobody does. I need you to keep it that way. You walk back in here, you act like your brother's not all the way there. You understand?" Darnell looked at him. The shock moved across his face, clean and honest. It didn't linger. It burned off, the way shock does when a man decides what he's going to do with the thing that caused it. He gave one hard nod. "Tell nobody," Andre said. "Nobody," Darnell said. The door opened. Camille came back in with a bottle of water, her bag over one shoulder, her phone in her other hand. She looked between the two of them with a warm, practiced smile. "He giving you a hard time?" she said to Darnell. Darnell leaned back in the chair and rubbed the back of his neck, his face soft and tired. "Just good to see him," he said. Camille set her bag on the windowsill and her phone face down on the bedside table. She pulled up a chair on the other side of the bed and took Andre's hand again. They sat like that. A family in a hospital room. To anyone looking in through the glass, that's exactly what it was. The phone buzzed. The screen lit up against the white of the bedside table. Just for a second, but enough. Andre's eyes moved to it without his head turning. The preview sat there in the notification bar, bright and clear. "V. Did you get the POA paperwork from the attorney yet? We need to move before—" The screen went dark. Camille reached over without looking and turned the phone over to face down. She kept talking. Something about the parking situation, about how far she'd had to walk from the garage, and her voice didn't miss a single beat. Andre looked at the ceiling. He didn't move. He didn't blink faster. He breathed at the same rate he had been breathing. He catalogued. POA, power of attorney. The attorney. Not her attorney, not their attorney. The attorney. Someone already identified. Someone already in motion. And V was not a contact you assigned a single letter to by accident. A single letter meant the name was familiar enough that it didn't need to be spelled out. A single letter meant someone who had been in her phone a long time. We need to move before... Before what? Before he got better. Before he could object. Before the window closed. Andre lay in the hospital bed and let Camille hold his hand. She was not careful enough, it turned out. Or she was careful enough for the man she believed she was dealing with. Just not for Andre. Over the next 11 days, Darnell came every afternoon. Sometimes twice. He would sit with Andre, and when Camille stepped out, to get food, to take a call, to use the restroom, Darnell would report in a low, fast voice, like a man reading off a list. A call to a separate attorney's office, not their family attorney. Someone new. A conversation with Marcus, Andre's operations manager at the firm. Darnell hadn't heard the whole thing, but Marcus had mentioned it to a colleague who'd mentioned it to Darnell. Camille had suggested Andre might need to step back from project decisions while he recovered, that someone should be authorized to speak on the firm's behalf in the interim. The balcony outside the third-floor family waiting room, Camille and Victor, twice in 1 week, keeping their voices down in the wind. Darnell relayed each piece without editorializing. He said the facts the way a man lays down bricks, one at a time, level, where they need to go. Andre listened and said nothing until Darnell was finished. Then he said the same thing each time. Keep going. On day 14, Darnell came in with a small, spiral-bound notebook tucked inside his jacket. He slid it under Andre's blanket during a handshake. That night, when the room was quiet and the hall lights had dimmed and Camille had gone home to the house he had paid for, Andre pulled out the notebook. He found a pen in the drawer of the bedside table. He opened to the first page. He wrote, "Day 14. She hasn't stopped. Neither will I." The house looked right. That was the first thing Andre noticed. Camille had arranged everything. A blanket folded over the arm of the couch, a glass of water on the side table, his reading glasses set out, even though he hadn't mentioned them. The kitchen smelled like something had been cooking since morning. There were flowers on the counter he didn't recognize, fresh ones, white and yellow, in a vase that caught the afternoon light coming through the window. She had worked on this. She walked him in with one hand on his lower back, guiding him the way you guide someone you're not sure can be trusted to walk on their own. Her voice was soft the entire ride home. "The steps, baby. Take them slow. You okay? You need water?" She had glanced over at him at every red light. Andre moved through the house like he was reading it for the first time. He touched the back of the couch. He stopped in the hallway and looked at a framed photo on the wall, the two of them at the coast, maybe 4 years back, and held his gaze there just a half-second too long. "You remember that trip?" Camille asked from behind him. He looked at her, blinked, let something uncertain cross his face. "We'll make new ones," she said, and squeezed his arm. She settled him on the couch. She brought soup he didn't ask for. She turned the television to a channel she said he used to like. She used the word "used," and he noticed it. And she sat across from him and watched him eat with an expression that was patient and gentle and completely unreadable underneath. He ate the soup. He let his spoon move slowly. He asked once where the bathroom was, even though he had used that bathroom 4,000 times. Camille told him. She smiled when she said it. Warm as anything. By 9 o'clock, she was in the bedroom with her phone and a glass of wine and the low sound of a streaming show coming through the cracked door. Darnell came through the back. Andre had left the rear door off the kitchen unlatched when Camille helped him inside that afternoon. A small thing, done while she was focused on the steps. Darnell had a key anyway, but this was cleaner. No sound, no mechanism, just a door that opened. Andre sat in the dim living room and did not move while Darnell went to work in the office at the end of the hall. He could hear almost nothing. Darnell was careful. He always had been. 20 minutes, maybe 25. Then the soft sound of the back door pulling shut again. Darnell came back at 11. By then, Camille had been asleep for 40 minutes. Andre had lain next to her in the dark and listened to her breathing slow and level out. And then he had waited another 10 minutes beyond that before he slipped out of the bed and went to the back door. They sat together at the kitchen table with the overhead light off and the small light above the stove on, just enough to see. Darnell laid his phone face up on the table and swiped through the photographs one at a time. Desk surface first. Stacked files, a legal pad with phone numbers, a folder from their bank. Nothing that hit immediately. Then the filing cabinet. Andre leaned forward. There was a manila folder photographed open, flat on the cabinet drawer, and inside it was a copy of his firm's operating agreement, the one he had signed when he and his business partner had formalized the structure 6 years ago. He recognized the header, the layout, the font. He had read that document 100 times, but not like this. The margins were full. Small, precise handwriting in blue ink. Camille wrote in blue ink. Always had. Her letters were tight and neat, and he had seen them on birthday cards and grocery lists and reminder notes on the refrigerator for 8 years. He looked at the numbers, ownership percentages, broken down and annotated. Asset valuations next to bracketed figures. The phrase liquid versus non-liquid with a line drawn between 2 columns. And then, in the lower right corner of the second page, circled, underlined once, if 51% transfers, he can't block. Beneath that, A name. An attorney. Someone Andre did not recognize. He looked at every photograph. He did not rush. He swiped back to several of them and looked again. Darnell sat across from him and said nothing. When Andre set the phone down, the kitchen was quiet enough to hear the refrigerator hum. "This isn't from the accident," Andre said. His voice was low and even. "No," Darnell said. Andre sat with that for a moment. The handwriting in the margins. The attorney's name he didn't know. The circled notation about 51%. She had been in his filing cabinet. She had read his operating agreement. She had done the math on what it would take to cut him out. And she had written it down in her own hand and put it back in a folder in his office. She wasn't waiting for an opportunity. She had been making one. "Find out who that attorney is," Andre said. Darnell nodded. "And tomorrow morning, first thing, call Petra Okafor." Another nod. Andre picked up the phone and looked at the photograph one more time. Then he handed it back to Darnell. He went to bed. He lay in the dark with his eyes closed and Camille breathing beside him, and he did not sleep. He ran numbers. He ran timelines. He calculated load-bearing points and failure conditions the way he calculated everything, methodically, without sentiment, from the foundation up. Darnell left at 7:15. He told Camille he had a supply run. Lumber yard in Decatur. A job that couldn't wait. Camille was in the kitchen in her robe, both hands around a coffee mug, and she nodded without really looking at him. She had already moved on to whatever was next in her morning. Darnell walked to his truck, pulled out of the driveway, and did not go to any lumber yard. Petra Okafor's office was on the 4th floor of a building off Peachtree Road, sandwiched between an accounting firm and a title company, which Darnell would later think was either a coincidence or the most efficient block in Atlanta. Her name was on the door in clean gold letters. No tagline, no list of practice areas, just the name. The receptionist showed him back without much ceremony. Petra was already at her desk when he walked in. She did not stand. She looked up from the document she was reading and studied him for exactly the amount of time it took to decide he was worth her attention, and then she put the document aside. "Sit," she said. He sat. She had a yellow legal pad in front of her and a pen in her right hand. Before he finished the first sentence, she let him talk. She did not react to anything he said. Not the hospital, not the POA paperwork, not the operating agreement with Camille's handwriting in the margins. She had the particular stillness of someone who had heard worse before lunch on a Tuesday. When Darnell finished, she looked down at the legal pad. Then she looked back up. "3 questions," she said. "First, what does he own outright? His name only, no joint title." Darnell listed what he knew. The business interest. One investment property in College Park that Andre had purchased 2 years before the marriage. A brokerage account, separate, that Camille had never asked about directly. Petra wrote as he talked. Second question, what's jointly held? The house. 2 other investment properties acquired during the marriage. The joint checking account. A savings account Camille monitored like a hawk. More writing. Third. Petra looked up. Prenuptial agreement. Is there one? Darnell was quiet for half a second. No, he said. Petra's expression did not change, but she set her pen down flat on the legal pad in the way someone sets something down when they want their hands free to think. He trusted her, Darnell said. Like that explained it. Because it did. They usually do, Petra said. She was not unkind about it. She simply moved forward. She picked the pen back up. I need to see him. Not here publicly. Bring him through the parking structure. Service entrance on the north side. Tomorrow afternoon, 2 o'clock. Camille doesn't know this office exists yet. I want to keep it that way. Darnell nodded. I can do that. Andre arrived the following afternoon through a side stairwell that smelled like concrete and recycled air. He was wearing a baseball cap, low and moving without the careful shuffle he performed at home. He sat down across from Petra, and looked at her the way he looked at everything, steady, taking it in, already processing. Petra did not waste his time. She laid it out in 3 parts. First, the business interest. It could be transferred into a properly structured trust, legally, cleanly, and within his full rights as sole owner of his stake. The transfer would not require Camille's signature. It would not trigger any joint property provisions. If it was done before Camille's attorney moved on the operating agreement, the 51% play she had been mapping in those margins became permanently impossible. The business would be beyond her reach before she knew it had moved. Second, the investment properties. The College Park property was his outright. Easy. The jointly held properties were more complex, but not unwinnable. Petra had a structure in mind. It would hold up. Third, the joint accounts. Petra paused there. She looked at Andre directly. The checking and savings. I'm recommending you leave them exactly where they are. Andre waited. She's been watching those accounts, Petra said. She checks the balances. She's looking for you to move money, and she's ready to use any transfer as evidence of dissipation if this goes to divorce court. So you don't touch them. Not a dollar. A brief pause. She looks at those accounts, and she thinks she knows where everything is. While she's looking there, everything that actually matters moves somewhere she can't follow. Andre was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "The accounts are the decoy." "The accounts," Petra said, "are exactly what she deserves to find." Andre sat back. He had listened to the full plan without interrupting once, without asking her to slow down, without any of the performance he wore at home. In this room, he was exactly who he was, a precise man evaluating a structure that someone else had built, checking it for load-bearing weakness, finding none. "There's a brother," he said, "Victor Hargrove. He was promised something. I don't know the full terms yet, but there's an arrangement." He looked at her. "I want the complete picture. Every arrangement, every name, every date. All of it documented and in my hands before I walk into that room." Petra looked at him for a moment. Then she wrote the name on her legal pad. 2 weeks, she said. "Come back through the same entrance." Andre stood, pulled the cap back down, and walked out the way he came in. An hour later, he was back on his couch, moving slowly, blinking at the television, asking Camille what day it was. She told him gently, and he nodded like he was trying hard to hold on to it. The file arrived on a Tuesday. Petra's investigator had driven it to a FedEx location near Darnell's apartment, rather than to any address connected to Andre. Darnell signed for it under his own name, carried it to his truck, and did not open it. That was not his job. Andre had a follow-up appointment with Dr. Solis at 11 o'clock. Camille drove him, waited in the lobby with her coffee and her phone, and did not come back to the examination room. She never did. She found medical settings tedious in a way she did not bother to hide anymore. Darnell was already in the room when the nurse showed Andre in. He had arrived separately, told the front desk he was the patient's brother and emergency contact, and been waved through without question. Doctor. Solis had been briefed, not on the details, just on the fact that Andre needed a few minutes of private time with his family before the clinical portion of the visit. She was a careful woman who had agreed to one unusual request and understood that the shape of that agreement was still active. She stepped out and closed the door. Darnell placed the envelope on the exam table. Andre opened it. There were 11 pages. He read the first page straight through, then turned to the second, then the third. His face did not move. His breathing did not change. He read with the same focused quiet he brought to a set of engineering schematics, looking for the structure of it, the load points, the places where something could fail or had been deliberately reinforced. He read the whole thing once. Then he went back to the first page and read it again. The document was a draft agreement. 2 parties, Camille Washington, listed by her full legal name on the left, and Victor Hargrove on the right. dated January 9th, 4 months and 11 days before the truck ran the red light in the rain. The terms were not complicated. In exchange for Victor's participation in facilitating an ownership transfer of Andre's firm, Victor would receive a 15% stake in the business upon completion. There were notes in the margin, Camille's handwriting, the same tight, precise script from the operating agreement Darnell had photographed weeks ago. Timelines, contingencies, a line that read, "In the event of any delay, parties to reassess trigger conditions." Trigger conditions. She had written those words in January, before the accident, before the rain and the red light, and the hospital room where she had stood at the foot of his bed and called him baby in a voice like warm water. She had been building this before any of that. The accident had not created the plan. It had just moved up the timeline. Andre folded the documents. He placed them inside his jacket, against his chest. He put his hand flat over the outside of the jacket for just a moment, like he was checking that they were still there. Darnell had not said a word the entire time. He stood near the door with his arms crossed and watched his brother read. Now he watched his brother sit still, on the edge of the exam table, and look at a fixed point on the floor. 8 years. A house with her name on the deed, beside his. A bed they had shared every night for most of a decade. Conversations about places they would travel to, things they would build together, the particular kind of future that two people construct from shared time and chosen trust. She had been sitting inside all of that, with a document in a drawer somewhere, already written, already dated, already signed. She had not been waiting for an opportunity. She had engineered the architecture of one, and then waited for reality to hand her a door. After a long moment, Andre looked up. He did not say anything about the 8 years. He did not say anything about the bed, or the conversations, or January 9th. He straightened his jacket, stood up from the exam table, and looked at Darnell with the steady, measuring expression of a man who has finished reading the blueprints and is now ready to begin. "She doesn't know Petra has this," he said. "No," Darnell said. Andre nodded once. Dr. Solis came back in. The appointment continued. That evening, Camille was on the back porch. Andre stood at the kitchen window with a glass of water in his hand, looking out through the glass. She had her back, partly to him. One arm crossed over her chest, the other raised, phone to her ear. She was wearing the gray cardigan she always wore in the evenings. He had bought it for her birthday 2 years ago. He watched her shoulders, the way her weight shifted to one hip, the slight tilt of her head when she was pushing a point. She was not worried. That much was clear from where he stood. She was impatient, pressing, but not worried. She had the body language of someone working a timeline they still believed they controlled. He could not hear her voice through the glass. He did not need to. What he did not know, and could not see, was the specific shape of the conversation happening on that porch. Camille's voice was low and even. The kind of low that means careful, not nervous. "He keeps missing the signature line," she said. "Every time I get close, he drifts. Last time he signed the wrong name entirely." A short pause. "I know. I know that, Victor." Victor's voice came through the phone tight and clipped. She held the phone a half-inch from her ear. "1 more week," she said. "I'll get it done." He's getting clearer, which actually helps. A lucid signature is harder to contest. She turned slightly, looking out at the backyard. "I'm not worried. He's confused. He's tired. He trusts me." She said the last 3 words with a certainty that had no doubt in it at all. It did not occur to her, not once, not even as a shadow of a thought at the far edge of her mind, that the man she was describing was at that precise moment standing at the kitchen window, watching her hold the phone, with a folded document pressed against his chest and 31 days of careful architecture already in place around her. She believed she was managing him. She had always believed that. Andre turned away from the window and walked down the hall to the bedroom. He sat on the edge of the bed. He reached under the mattress and pulled out the small notebook. He opened it to the last entry. Day 14. She hasn't stopped. Neither will I. He turned forward through the blank pages until he reached the next clean one. He wrote, Day 31. She still doesn't know. Petra's office was on the 14th floor of a building on Peachtree Street. Clean lines, good light. The kind of space that communicated competence without trying too hard. Andre arrived at 7:45 in the morning, before the building's front desk was fully staffed. Darnell had dropped him off at the parking garage entrance. Camille believed he was at a low-key physical therapy consultation. She had offered to drive him. He had told her he needed to start doing things on his own, that it felt important for his recovery. She had smiled and said she understood. She had let him go alone because she had no reason not to. Petra was already at her desk when he walked in. She had a legal pad in front of her and a ceramic mug of coffee she had not touched. She did not stand. She gestured at the chair across from her desk and waited until he sat. It's done, she said. 2 words. She did not dress them up. Andre looked at her steadily. All of it. All of it. She opened the folder in front of her and turned it to face him. The business interest transferred into the Ironwood Trust on Friday. Properly structured. Properly filed. Your signature on the trust documents predates anything Camille has attempted to initiate by 11 days. She turned to the next page. The 3 investment properties have been retitled. 2 into the trust, 1 into an LLC you now wholly control. Again, all executed before she made a single move that would hold up in court. Andre scanned the pages. She let him. The joint accounts, he said. Untouched. Exactly as we discussed. A brief pause. She has checked that account balance twice in the last 2 weeks. Based on the access log your bank flagged. She is watching those funds. Good. She will keep watching them, Petra said. And miss everything else. Andre closed the folder. He sat back in the chair, one hand resting flat on the armrest. He was not relieved. Not exactly. Relief implies you were afraid something would not work. Andre had designed this structure piece by piece and had trusted the construction. What he felt was closer to the quiet satisfaction of a man who has run the load calculations and confirmed that the numbers hold. My partner, he said. Marcus comes in at 9. Marcus Webb had co-founded the firm with Andre 11 years ago. He was a year older, an inch shorter, and the only person besides Darnell who had been told the full picture, told it carefully, in a single conversation, with documentation laid out in front of him so that nothing was left to interpretation. He had listened to all of it without interrupting. Then he had asked one question. How do you want to handle the operating agreement? That had told Andre everything he needed to know about Marcus. When Marcus arrived at Petra's office at 9, he sat down, read through the restructured operating agreement with the same unhurried attention he gave to every contract, and signed at the bottom of each page. The restructured agreement formalized the ownership structure in a way that made any future transfer of controlling interest, the 51% that Camille's margin notes had circled and underlined, not just difficult, but permanently impossible without Marcus's explicit consent. What Camille had planned required Andre's signature and a compliant partner. She had never counted on the partner. Marcus capped his pen and placed it on Petra's desk. He looked at Andre. I'll be there, he said. The invitation to Camille was delivered that afternoon. Not by Andre, by Petra's office, in the form of a brief, formal letter addressed to both Andre and Camille Washington, describing a care planning discussion to be held at their residence. The letter named the participants in deliberate and carefully chosen language. Andre's attending physician, his brother, and a financial advisor engaged to review the household situation during Andre's recovery period. The language was clinical and unremarkable. The kind of letter a careful attorney's office might generate as a matter of routine. Nothing in it would give a careful reader pause. Camille read it at the kitchen counter, while André sat at the table eating lunch, staring vaguely in the direction of the window. "This is next Thursday," she said. André said. "That's fine. That's good, actually." She set the letter down. Her voice had the particular smoothness it got when she was deciding something. "I'm going to ask Victor to come, just for support. Would that bother you?" André looked at her slowly, the way a man looks when he is assembling a thought from scattered pieces. "Victor," he said, like he was trying the word out. "My brother," she said, patient, warm. "You know Victor." André nodded, soft and unsteady. "Okay," he said. She patted his hand and took the letter to the other room. That night, after Camille had gone upstairs, André sat in the dark of the back hallway with his phone low against his leg and sent Darnell a single text message. It contained no explanation, just a list of names: Petra, Dr. Solis, Marcus, you, her attorney, she'll bring one, Victor. Darnell's response came back in under a minute. "We ready?" André set the phone down on the cushion beside him and looked out into the quiet living room. The lamp on the side table threw a low, warm light across the couch. The coffee table, the framed photograph of the two of them from a trip they had taken to Savannah 4 years ago. His house, his furniture, his name on the deed. He settled back into the cushion, let his expression go soft and distant. He had been performing this for 31 days. Tomorrow, he remembers everything. The morning came in gray and cool. Camille was up before 7. André heard her moving through the bathroom, the soft click of the closet door, the particular quiet that settles over a house when someone is being deliberate about not making noise. He lay still with his eyes half open and listened to the sound of a woman preparing herself for a room she believed she already owned. By 8:30, she was downstairs. Fitted black dress, simple jewelry. Hair pulled back in the clean, practiced way she wore it when she wanted people to take her seriously. She looked composed and capable, and genuinely beautiful. And André, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee going cold in front of him, watched her move and felt nothing that resembled what he once had. That was its own kind of grief. He filed it away. Victor arrived at 9. He knocked twice and let himself in the way a man does when he believes the house is already, in some functional sense, his family's territory. He was broad-shouldered, dressed in a collared shirt he had ironed carefully, and he carried the particular energy of someone who had rehearsed his own calmness. He gave André a look on the way to the kitchen. Brief, assessing. The look a man gives a problem he considers already solved. "Morning, André," he said. André blinked at him slowly. "Morning," he said. Victor moved past him without another word. André stared at the window. The others arrived just before 10. They came together, not by accident, but by design, because André had asked Petra to coordinate the timing, and Petra had done it exactly. Dr. Solis with her soft leather bag, Petra with a flat document case held against her side like a blade in a sheath. Marcus Webb, quiet and steady in a dark blazer, who looked around the room when he walked in and made brief, direct eye contact with André before finding his seat. Darnell last, who came in without ceremony and moved to the far corner of the room with his arms loosely at his sides, like a man simply finding somewhere to stand. Camille welcomed them with warmth she had prepared in advance. She offered coffee. She was gracious and unhurried. She introduced her attorney, a trim man named Carroll who had not been on any guest list, as someone she had asked to be present simply for clarity's sake. She said it pleasantly, as if the addition were obvious and small. Carroll had already opened a folder by the time the room settled. André sat on the couch. His posture was slightly rounded. His eyes moved around the room with the mild, unfocused quality he had practiced for 31 days. He held his coffee mug in both hands. Dr. Solis spoke first. A brief clinical summary, language measured and professional. Significant head trauma. Reasonable expectation of cognitive disruption during recovery. Monitoring continues. Carol leaned forward before she had fully finished. Given that context, he said, I think it would be useful to discuss. Andre stood up. Not slowly, not uncertainly, not like a man collecting himself piece by piece. He stood the way a man stands when he has been sitting by choice. The room registered it. Camille's chin lifted almost imperceptibly. Victor went still. Carol stopped mid-sentence, his mouth still slightly open. Andre looked at Carol. His voice was quiet and even. Close the folder. Carol glanced at Camille. Camille's expression held. Mr. Washington, Carol began. I understand this may be. I said close the folder. Not louder. Flatter. The tone of a man who will not be saying it again. Carol closed it. Andre did not look at him after that. He turned to the coffee table, and he set down his mug, and he reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and placed a folded stack of documents on the surface in front of him. He straightened up. He looked at his wife. Camille met his eyes. Something moved behind hers. Quick, small, and immediately suppressed. She was still working. He could see it. Even now. He began to speak. November 9th. His voice was measured. No theater in it. You called the insurance company at 2:17 in the afternoon. The policy number you gave them was the one on the document you photographed on my desk in September. I know the date of that, too. He laid the first document on the table. November 15th. The hospital hallway. You asked Dr. Solis how long a memory loss patient could legally be considered incapacitated. I was conscious. I heard every word. A second document. Day 2 of my hospital stay. Your phone. Victor's message. Did you get the POA paperwork from the attorney yet? We need to move before... He paused for exactly one beat. I read it before the screen went dark. Camille said, Andre. He kept speaking. Not over her. Through her. The way a current moves through a space regardless of what is placed in it. The operating agreement, your handwriting in the margin. If 51% transfers, he can't block. The name of an attorney I've never hired. The document landed on the table. And this. He placed the last document at the center of the pile. A draft contract. Your signature. Victor's name. 15% of a company he contributed nothing to. He looked up. Dated 4 months before a truck ran a red light. Camille's voice came sharp and fast. You don't understand what you're... The insurance call. He continued as if she hadn't spoken. The hospital conversation, the text preview, the margin notes, the draft contract. He touched each document in turn. I understand all of it. I have understood all of it since day 2. Victor stood up. He rose with his full height and his full weight, and the particular intention of a man who uses his body as an argument. From the corner of the room, Darnell stood up too. He didn't say anything. He didn't move toward anyone. He just stood, steady and unhurried, and looked at Victor with an expression that communicated a single, complete idea. Victor sat back down. Andre had not turned around during any of it. He was still looking at Camille. His voice, when it came, did not rise, but it carried something that had not been in it before. Not anger, not heat, but weight. The specific gravity of a thing that has been held in place for a very long time. You spent 8 years inside a life you were planning to take from me. He let that sit for a moment. I spent 31 days learning exactly who you are. Camille's eyes were bright. Her jaw was tight. She was still fighting the reflex to manage, to redirect, to reframe, to find the angle that put her back in control of the room. He could see it happening behind her face. The machine, still running. He turned away from her. Counselor. Petra opened her folder. Petra did not stand. She didn't need to. She set the document case flat on the coffee table, unzipped it with one clean motion, and began placing pages in a row like a hand of cards laid face up at the end of a game. Her movements were unhurried, precise, the movements of someone who has done this many times and finds no drama in it, only the satisfying mechanics of work completed correctly. Washington Family Trust, she said. Executed and filed 14 days ago. She tapped the first document. The business interest, all of it, transferred into a revocable trust with Mr. Washington as sole trustee. She moved to the next page. The Cascade Road property, the Bankhead investment property, both retitled. Another page. The joint accounts remain untouched, exactly as they were. She looked up briefly, not at Camille, but at Carol. What remains in the marital estate is what Georgia law requires. Calculated to the dollar. Carol had been leaning forward, reading as Petra spoke. His finger moved slowly down the first page, then the second. He turned to the third, and he stayed there longer than the others, and the room was quiet enough that the refrigerator hum from the kitchen was audible. He closed his folder. He turned toward Camille. He didn't lower his voice quite enough. There is nothing here that would survive discovery, he said. Not with this paper trail. Not with these dates. Camille did not look at him. For a long moment, she looked at nothing. Her hands were folded in her lap, with the controlled precision of a woman who had been managing her own expressions for so long that the habit held even now, even here, even in this. Then it slipped. Not all at once. Not in any dramatic collapse. No raised voice. No tears streaming. It was smaller than that, and uglier for it. A tightening around her eyes. A breath that didn't quite come out right. The mask of someone who has worn it so long they forgot it was a mask. And then suddenly remember, and there is nothing underneath that they are prepared to show. This is vindictive, she said. Her voice came out thinner than she intended. You know that, right? This is vindictive, and it is humiliating. And you have just sat here and… She stopped, started again. We built something. 8 years, Andre. And you're going to sit there and act like I'm… You should have tried that, Andre said, before you put Victor's name on a contract for my company. The sentence landed and did not move. Camille closed her mouth. Andre did not look away from her, but he did not press further. There was nothing further to press. The sentence was complete. The room understood it. Even Camille understood it. She looked down at her folded hands and said nothing else. Darnell reached into his jacket pocket. He produced a phone, set it on the coffee table beside Petra's documents, and pressed play. The recording had some ambient road noise at the start, the hollow, slightly tinny sound of a car interior. Then a phone ringing. Then Victor's voice, clear enough. Yeah. Darnell's voice, casual, easy. Just checking where we're at. He still hasn't signed anything? Not yet, but she says 1 more week. The account numbers I gave her were right. I confirmed it. Once the transfer processes, my cut comes directly out of the operating… Victor stood up. That's… He pointed at the phone. That's out of context. That's not… That's a private conversation. You can't just… 2-party consent, Petra said. She didn't look up from her documents. Mr. Washington was on the line. That's not what I was talking about a different deal. A completely separate… Victor. Petra said his name once. The way you set something down on a hard surface. Flat. Final. He stopped. She looked at him now. Not at the room. Only at Victor. Her expression held no particular malice. It was the expression of a woman stating a fact about weather. The recording and the draft agreement, dated, signed, and sitting in my file, constitute documentary evidence of conspiracy to commit financial fraud. She let that word settle. Fraud. I have a filing prepared. It is dated. It is complete. She paused. It is currently sitting in my office. She did not say, "And it will stay there." She did not say, "As long as you behave yourself." She didn't need to construct the sentence that way. The shape of it was already clear. Victor's jaw moved. His eyes went to the documents on the table, then to Darnell, then back to Petra. He said nothing. At the far end of the room, Marcus Webb, Andre's business partner, looked at Victor with the quiet, settled expression of a man who has just finished deciding something. He didn't speak, didn't shift in his seat. He simply looked and held it for 2 full seconds, and then looked away. Victor understood that look. Any man who operates in Atlanta's construction and development world understands exactly what it means when a man like Marcus Webb files your face into a particular drawer in his memory. Carroll gathered his folder, snapped his briefcase shut, and left without making eye contact with anyone. The sign was new. Washington Structural Group, Project Site. Black letters on a white background, clean and bold, staked into the Georgia clay at the entrance to the lot. Andre slowed his truck as he passed it, not because he needed to read it, but because he still liked what it felt like to see it. He parked and stepped out into the early morning air. The site was already moving. Crew members in hard hats, a foreman reviewing plans by the trailer, the low groan of heavy equipment somewhere past the tree line. A bridge project 3 times the size of the Cascade Road job, the largest contract his firm had ever signed. He walked the perimeter first, the way he always did, measured the space with his eyes before anyone had a chance to brief him on it. Noticed the drainage issue near the eastern edge that the site report had flagged but not fully addressed. Made a mental note. He would bring it up at the 9 o'clock review. He moved through the site with ease, not the ease of a man who had stopped paying attention, but the particular ease of a man who no longer had anything to prove to anyone on the premises. His crew knew what that looked like. They gave him space to see what he needed to see. And then they waited. 18 months ago, this firm had been something a woman with a pen and a plan almost took from him. Now his name was on the sign. The bridge project had finished in October. On time, under budget, exactly as promised. 2 new contracts came in before the end of Q1. The restructured partnership with Marcus was formalized in January, put on paper the way it should have been years ago, with protections and clear terms and no ambiguity about what belonged to whom. The firm was leaner and cleaner and better for all of it. Andre did not talk about what had happened. He didn't need to. Atlanta handles certain stories without any help. Camille received her settlement in November. Petra had calculated it to the dollar. What Georgia law required, no more. It was fair. It was final. Camille signed it and relocated to Charlotte 2 weeks later. The house sold in the spring. The social world she had shared with Andre, the dinners, the professional circles, the people who had smiled at her across tables for 8 years, received the story the way Atlanta receives most stories, without announcement, without drama, and without mercy. Doors she expected to open simply did not. Invitations stopped coming. People she expected to call her back stopped doing that too. No one coordinated it. No one had to. The city just quietly closed around the space she had left behind. Victor's year was its own accounting. He lost the Decatur contract in March when the developer quietly chose another firm. 2 referrals he had counted on, relationships he had cultivated for years, went to other contractors without explanation. His calls to 2 developers inside Marcus Webb's network were not returned. There was no announcement, no confrontation, no dramatic moment where someone told him why. He just started getting fewer calls back. Petra's filing sat in her office, dated, complete. She had not touched it. She did not need to. Victor knew it was there the way you know about a bruise you can't stop pressing. Not because it helps, but because the reminder keeps you careful. He had spent the year being careful. Andre suspected he would spend several more years the same way. Darnell's backyard smelled like charcoal and cut grass. They were on the back porch as the sun went down, plates in their laps, the sounds of the neighborhood settling in around them. A dog somewhere down the block, kids in a yard further up the street. The ordinary music of a summer evening that had no idea it was supposed to feel significant. Andre set his fork down and looked out at the yard. "I almost didn't go to that job site that night," he said. "Almost came straight home." Darnell chewed, thought about it for about half a second. Then the truck would have hit her. Andre laughed. It came out of him easy and full, and Darnell's laugh followed right behind it. And for a moment, they were just two brothers on a porch who had been through something real and had come out the other side with their names still intact, and plates full of food, and absolutely nowhere else they needed to be. It wasn't the laugh of men celebrating pain. It was something cleaner than that. The laugh of men who had carried something heavy for a long time and had finally set it down in the right place. Andre drove home alone. He pulled up to a red light 3 blocks from Darnell's house and let the engine idle. The city moved around him. He reached into the center console and pulled out the small notebook. He opened it to the last written entry. The handwriting was cramped, written in low light, the letters slightly uneven. Day 14. She hasn't stopped. Neither will I. He looked at it for a moment, then he turned to a blank page, uncapped the pen, and wrote one word. Done. He put the notebook back, started the car, and drove. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.